Last week, an article was published about a survey poll conducted by Gallup that found, for the first time in American history, a majority of American voters said they would vote for a well-qualified atheist candidate for president. This is the highest ever response, up from 18% in 1958, and finally breaking the 50% majority threshold with 54% this year. However, the hypothetically qualified candidate who is an atheist is still behind every other major group polled for, including gays and lesbians at 68% and Muslims at 58%. Still, it is showing a growing trend when in August of 2011 the accepted viability of candidacy was still below 50%. There are several reasons which could explain this upswing, including the religion of presidential candidate Mitt Romney and the still contested religion of current President Barack Obama, as well as the new visibility of atheists and their impact on technology, science, and writing. Also last week, Reuters reported that religion has little impact on the current U.S. presidential race, saying that the religions of Mitt Romney and Barack Obama will not play a deciding factor in who is elected this November. By now, nearly all Americans are aware that Mitt Romney is a Mormon. The U.S. has never had a Mormon president. Mormons are typically seen by mainstream Christians as heretical and blasphemous, some even equating it to an occult. But more worryingly, perhaps, only 49% of Americans think Barack Obama is a Christian, with 31% saying they're unsure of his religion. This ongoing and tiring debate has likely helped pave an awareness that just because you don't agree with a leader's religion, it doesn't mean the skies are going to open and pour down hellfire and widespread death. For conservatives, their only option is maybe not Christian, maybe not Muslim, Barack Obama, and the fringe sect of Christianity follower Mitt Romney. The security blanket option of a Protestant or Catholic being in the Oval Office this year will not be an available option, forcing voters to choose between the lesser of two evils as far as religion is concerned in their eyes, when 67% of voters agree with the statement that it is important to me that a president has a strong religious belief. So why now? Why the change? What's happening today? Quite a lot, actually. The American Religious Identification Study of March 2009 found that those who claim no religion were the only demographic that grew in all 50 states. Those identifying themselves as atheist doubled from 7% in 1990 to more than 15% in 2009, and at just under 20% today. This makes atheists the fastest growing minority in the U.S., and it's showing no signs of slowing. A USA Today article stated, "Unbelief is on the uptick. People who check none for their religious affiliation are now nearly 1 in 5 Americans, the highest ever documented, according to the Pew Center for the People and the Press. The rapid rise of nones, N-O-N-E-S, including atheists, agnostics, and those who say they believe nothing in particular, defies the usually glacial rate of change in spiritual identity. But forces could hold atheist numbers down. First, they are disproportionately young, often single and highly educated, all groups with notoriously low birth rates. A 2009 Pew Forum look at switching found more than 10% of American adults became atheists after growing up in a religious group. This is the chief way the group is growing, since they have a relatively low birth rate. While this is all positive for the irreligious movement, atheists are still the most distrusted group of all ever accounted for, even tied with or below rapists. A co-author of the study conducted by the University of British Columbia and the University of Oregon said, "It's pretty remarkable. People find atheists very suspect. They don't fear God, so we should distrust them. They do not have the same moral obligations of others. This is a common refrain against atheists. People fear them as a group." This study stemmed from a 2003 University of Minnesota study that also found atheists to be the most distrusted group. The 2003 study, headed by Penny Edgell, found that atheists rank below several other minority groups, including immigrants, gays and lesbians, conservative Christians, Jews, and Muslims, as least likely to share an everyday American's vision of society. She continues, "We thought that in the wake of 9/11, people would target Muslims. Frankly, we expected atheists to be a throwaway group." She said atheists are scapegoated in ways Catholics, Jews, and communists once were. They are perceived to be on the other side of what Americans view as a symbolic moral boundary. They're associated with moral and social disorder, she said. Responding to the results, Minnesota Atheist President August Berkshire said, "Belief in God is no guarantee of good behavior and is too often used to justify bad behavior." The study also showed that the more educated an individual was, the more accepting they were. This will also play out in the analysis of atheists coming up shortly. It's a bit ironic that in 2012, atheists are still seen as social pariahs. 14 years ago, in 1998, the journal Nature conducted a study comparing the religiosity of scientists who are members of the prestigious National Academy of Sciences now against the religiosity since 1914. Today's results are staggering. 93% of your most prominent scientists, the greatest thinkers, do not believe in a higher power. And these are the results. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson had this to say about the results. "I want to put on the table not why 93% of the members of the National Academy of Sciences reject God. I want to know why 7% of the National Academy don't." But why is there such an irrational dislike of atheists? Other than Americans being stunningly resistant to change or new ideas, the answer lies in the testimony of the pious spouting off Psalm 14. The list of notable atheists and critics of religion and its teachings is so extensive it could fill in a Harry Potter book-length book. They are actually the fabric of almost everything you do in your daily life, from technology, philanthropy, education, literature, and music. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Brad Pitt, Penn and Teller, Morgan Freeman, Susan B. Anthony, most of our founding fathers, George Clooney, Stephen Hawking, Mark Twain, the father of modern computing, Alan Turing, and so on. In an article written by Gregory Paul and Phil Zuckerman, they annihilate common misconceptions of atheists. I'll read a lengthy passage by them because I feel it is one of the most explicit and deserved redemptions of atheists. A growing body of social science research reveals that atheists and non-religious people in general are far from the unsavory beings many assume them to be. On basic questions of morality and human decency, issues such as governmental use of torture, the death penalty, punitive hitting of children, racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, environmental degradation, or human rights, the irreligious tend to be far more ethical than their religious peers, particularly compared with those who describe themselves as very religious. Consider that at the societal level, murder rates are far lower in secularized nations such as Japan and Sweden than they are in the much more religious United States, which also has a much greater portion of its population in prison. Even within this country, those states with the highest levels of church attendance, such as Louisiana and Mississippi, have significantly higher murder rates than far less religious states, such as Vermont and Oregon. As individuals, atheists tend to score high on measures of intelligence, especially verbal ability and scientific literacy. They tend to raise their children to solve problems rationally, to make up their own minds when it comes to existential questions, and to obey the golden rule. They are more likely to practice safe sex than the strongly religious are, and are less likely to be nationalistic or ethnocentric. They value freedom of thought. Denmark, which is among the least religious countries in the history of the world, consistently rates as the happiest of nations. On numerous respected measures of societal success, rates of poverty, teenage pregnancy, abortion, sexually transmitted diseases, obesity, drug use, and crime, as well as economics, high levels of secularity are consistently correlated with positive outcomes in first world nations. None of the secular advanced democracies suffers from combined social ills seen here in Christian America. More than 2,000 years ago, whoever wrote Psalm 14 claimed that atheists were foolish and corrupt, incapable of doing any good. These put-downs have had sticking power. Negative stereotypes of atheists are still alive and well. Yet, like all stereotypes, they aren't true, and perhaps they tell us more about those who harbor them than those who are maligned by them. Study after study after study after study has shown that most atheistic countries are the happiest, most educated, healthiest, best taken care of, most ethically minded, fairest, least war involved, least violent with the smallest rates of imprisonment, and the most stable people than those with high religious influence. That hardly seems like the sort of endowment a great creator would bestow on those who reject it the most. But continuing on, and to wrap up, evolutionary biologist Jerry Coyne wrote an article called "As Atheists Know, You Can Be Good Without God," whereby he explains in very simple terms and in damning persuasion where morality comes from without the infusion of the supernatural. It's clear that even for the faithful, God cannot be the source of morality, but at best a transmitter of some human-generated morality. This isn't just some philosophical rumination, because God, at least the God of Christians and Jews, repeatedly sanctioned or ordered immoral acts in the Old Testament. These include slavery, genocide, the slaying of adulterers and homosexuals, and the stoning of non-virgin brides. Was God being moral when, after some children made fun of the prophet Elisha's bald head, he made bears rip 42 of them to pieces? Even in the New Testament, Jesus preaches principles of questionable morality, barring heaven to the wealthy, approving the beating of slaves, and damning sinners to the torments of hell. Similar sentiments appear in the Quran. Now, few of us see genocide or stoning as moral, so Christians and Jews pass over those parts of the Bible with judicious silence. But that's just the point. There is something else, some other source of morality that supersedes biblical commands. When religious people pick and choose their morality from Scripture, they clearly do so based on extra-religious notions of what's moral. Further, the idea that morality is divinely inspired doesn't jibe with the fact that religiously based ethics have changed profoundly over time. Slavery was once defended by churches on scriptural grounds. Now it's seen as grossly immoral. Mormons barred blacks from the priesthood, also on religious grounds, until church leaders have a convenient revelation to the contrary in 1978. Catholics once held a list of books considered immoral to read. They did away with that in 1966. Did these adjustments occur because God changed his mind? No. They came from secular improvements in morality that forced religion to clean up its act. Should we be afraid that a morality based on our genes and our brains is somehow inferior to one handed down from above? Not at all. In fact, it's far better, because secular morality has a flexibility and responsiveness to social change that no God-given morality could ever have. Secular morality is what pushes religion to improve its own dogma on issues such as slavery and the treatment of women. Secular morality is what prevents ethically irrelevant matters, what we eat, read, or wear, when we work, or whom we have sex with, from being grouped with matters of genuine moral concern, like rape and child abuse. And really, isn't it better to be moral because you've worked out for yourself, in conjunction with your group, the right thing to do, rather than because you want to propitiate a god or avoid punishment in the hereafter? Nor should we worry that a society based on secular morality will degenerate into lawlessness. That experiment has already been done in countries such as Sweden and Denmark that are largely filled with non-believers and atheists. So let's continue bucking the trend. When it comes to voting, vote on policies and qualifications, not who has the closest resemblance to the type of God you associate with. It's been shown to have disastrous effects, and those who can dump those beliefs altogether are abundantly better off socially and societally. And don't fear atheists. They're an integral part of the success of humanity's continued existence.